Cathie Wood did a good amount of selling in Q2 of 2023. She also added some interesting new names such as Palantir and Archer Aviation. I'll dive into all of her recent moves over the quarter and I'll jump into her current holdings for her portfolio. So, with that being said, let's take a look at Cathie Wood's portfolio and the recent changes made. So, we can see here, starting with her top 50 companies that she holds, she actually sold down Tesla. She cut her exposure by almost 10%, and Tesla now makes up about 9% of her total portfolio with about $1.2 billion worth of shares. And then Coinbase, she increased her holdings by 2%. UiPath, she increased her holdings by 7%. Roku, she actually saw a decline in her holdings by 4%. Square, she increased by 2%. Zoom, she started selling out of. Exact Sciences, which is actually one of her largest holdings and has been for a while, she decreased her holdings by 37%. Shopify, another large sale, down 36%. DraftKings, she cut about a quarter of her shares there. And then 10x Genomics Inc., she cut about a quarter of her shares there. Nvidia, she cut over a quarter of her shares. So really a lot of large sells from Cathie Wood in this quarter. And then also MELI, she cut about 26% of her shares. But in terms of the new buys, so she bought Palantir, and this currently makes up about 1% of the portfolio, which is about $104 million worth of shares. And then one thing I also thought was interesting is she sold down Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. And this is interesting to me because she's kind of becoming bearish on Bitcoin, right? That this is a spot Bitcoin ETF. So if she's selling down the ETF, she's selling Bitcoin essentially, right? So this kind of tells you that Cathie Wood is actually somewhat bearish on Bitcoin in at least the short term. That's just what her actions are saying. But back to the new buys. So she bought Palantir, as I'd said. She also bought Meta Platforms. She had bought shares at about $286, and she owns about 200,000 shares, which is roughly $57 million. And then Archer Aviation is a big buy for her. About $37 million worth of shares were bought, and this is about 9.1 million shares. So this is a new position for her, and given Archer Aviation is a pretty small stock, I do think Cathie Wood's influence will have some positive effect on the company. And she bought in at about $4.12. So when you compare that to the current price today, that's actually a pretty good entry point, given that the price today is about $6.22. So she had a really good trade there with Archer Aviation, likely kind of front running that move that we saw, with regulatory approval for test flights, and we also, she probably also front ran that move that we saw in Joby as well, same industry there. So interesting stuff. She also increased her position in Twilio by 12%. She increased UiPath, as I had said, and then Teradyne, she almost doubled her position, increasing her shares by 92%. She now has $130 million allocated to Teradyne, and she was selling down Nvidia pretty heavily, minus 28%. So interesting moves from her. Obviously, she's a massively influential investor, so I do think her investments are very, very interesting to kind of keep an eye on, right? So with that being said, let's take a look at her portfolio once more, and we can see, Zoom down 3.7%, as I had said. Square, she increased. Schrodinger, she actually sold about 10% of her shares. Let's see if we can't find Joey here. So Caterpillar, she also had bought about 4%. So let's see if we can't. JD.com, or excuse me, okay, so Joby here, she increased her holdings by 41%, which is a huge jump. And it's interesting to see her kind of diving headfirst into the, personalized, or I shouldn't say personalized, kind of helicopter taxi type of business with Joby and Archer Aviation, definitely signaling that she's bullish on that space. So with that being said, let's take a look at her sector breakdown. 37% of the portfolio is in technology, 28% of the portfolio roughly is in healthcare, 11% is in consumer discretionary, 9% is in other, and then telecommunications about 7%, industrials 3%, finance about 3%. So her biggest holdings are still Tesla, Roku, Coinbase, UiPath, Zoom, Block, Enact Sciences, DraftKings, Shopify, Teladoc, Twilio, United Software, and others, but that was in order there. So, you know, with that being said, though, let's take a look at her historical performance. So, over the last 10 years, Cathie Wood has had a 100% gain in her portfolio. So that is a pretty good number, although it's kind of in line with the S&P 500. Sorry, Cathie. You're basically performing with the market. Although I do think some of the stocks that she invests in are super interesting and really, worthy of, kind of keeping an eye on. But it's interesting to see here. So she's completely wiped out her, 2020 gains, which I thought was pretty interesting. So in 2020, before the COVID drop, she had 161% return. And then, obviously at the peaks of COVID, or the peaks of the post-COVID market, which was crazy, she had about almost 600% return. Now that's back down to about 100%. The S&P 500 on average yields about 8 to 10% a year. So she's basically in line with the S&P 500 after all of these COVID gains have been wiped out, unfortunately. And then in terms of beta, she has extremely high beta. So this beta is at 1.9. For those that don't know, that basically means that if the market went up 10%, her stocks would go up 19%. So she just has a very volatile, portfolio, which probably isn't shocking to you. And then we can see the buys and sells. So she actually did more selling than buying in Q2 of 2023. So she had sold about $1.5 billion worth of stocks, and she bought about 570 million. So this tells me that she's a net seller of about $1 billion worth of stocks. So Cathie Wood is selling. I put out a video, earlier this week about Warren Buffett selling down his portfolio. So it's interesting to see that the most respected investors, especially Warren Buffett, are kind of selling the stock market down. I thought that was kind of interesting. Let's take a look down memory lane for Cathie Wood. Let's see what stocks have been her biggest gainers in her history, which stocks have been her biggest losers. So this NVIDIA position has been a great one for her. Obviously, she just sold out about 28%, so she's really locking in profits with that sale. So she made about 436% gain in that stock, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then this bond ETF, she actually made about 353%. ServiceNow, she made about 323%, and she sold out in 2018. And then MSCI, she made about 290%. Plug Power, she made about 285%. Although she sold before that COVID jump. I'm sure she probably wasn't happy about that one. So interesting, but let's take a look at her biggest losers. So her biggest loser is Wirecard AG, which went to zero. She rode all the way down to zero. Not ideal. And then Sunny Cellular Communications, she rode all the way down to zero as well, in 2019. So, not loving that. And then, not really any other prominent names here. Silvergate, she was a big investor in Silvergate. Obviously ran down to darn near zero. Stocks about a dollar and change. And then Skills, she sold for a 97% loss. So that's kind of all her prominent losses she's taking. Lending Tree, she's sold that for about 93% loss. Grubhub, she sold for about 93% loss. So, with all that being said, she's a great investor. She has great calls. I really love the way her fund and her firm kind of take a larger view on investments rather than just like a balance sheet. She kind of invests more in stories and themes and industries rather than just balance sheets, assets and liabilities like our good friend Warren Buffett does. So with that being said, very interesting to see her portfolio moves. I'll link this doc below so you can kind of break down all of this stuff, all of her top 50 moves, so you can just have it for yourself. So, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll end it there.